The wind screamed across the dead planet like a wounded animal. Gray dust swirled between broken rocks and twisted metal scraps that had once been something important. In the shadow of black mountains, thousands of beings huddled in shelters made from garbage and hope. Elder Keth pressed his scarred face against the cracked window of what used to be a supply container. His yellow eyes watched the sky for ships that might bring death or salvation. At 63 cycles old, he had learned that hope was dangerous, but impossible to kill completely. Behind him, the shelter buzzed with quiet activity. 3 different species worked together to repair a water recycler. The 6-armed vegans used their extra hands to hold tiny parts while an Andromedan's sticky fingers provided the delicate touch needed for the wiring. A young human-like Centaurian translated between the different languages, her 4 eyes allowing her to read multiple instruction manuals at once. They had been doing this for 7 years now. 7 years since their own peoples had decided they were too different, too dangerous, or too inconvenient to keep around. The Altarians had sent Keth here because he questioned the war with the neighboring star system. The vegans arrived because their extra arms were considered a genetic mistake. The Andromedans came because other species found their slug-like appearance disgusting. Each group had their own story of rejection, but the ending was always the same. A one-way ticket to Kepler 442c, a planet so harsh and remote that no one would ever bother to check if they survived. Most didn't. Keth moved away from the window and walked through the narrow passages between living spaces. In one corner, an elderly vegan female named Zara taught mathematics to a mixed group of children. Her 6 arms drew equations in the air while young minds from 4 different species tried to follow along. The children had been born here, in exile. They knew no other home. In the medical section, Dr. Vogt worked on an injured miner. The Andromedan's healing slime could fix most wounds, but food was running short again. Bodies that should have healed in days now took weeks. Everyone was getting thinner. Elder Keth called a voice from the communication station. It was Pilot Nerex, a Centaurian who had been exiled for refusing to bomb civilian targets during a border conflict. The morning patrol reports movement in Sector 7. Keth felt his stomach drop. Movement usually meant one of 2 things. Either the Council had sent ships to relocate them to an even worse place, or the native creatures were getting ready to attack again. The crawlers were the size of ground vehicles, with crystal shells that could deflect most weapons and claws that could tear through metal. They lived deep underground but came to the surface during the dust storms to hunt. The colonists had learned to recognize the signs, but knowledge didn't make the creatures less dangerous. How many? Keth asked. Hard to tell. The dust is making senses difficult. But it looks like a large group. Through the shelter's communication system, Keth's voice reached every living space. Attention all residents. Crawler signs detected in Sector 7. Begin storm protocols immediately. The response was immediate and practiced. Families secured loose items, checked their emergency supplies, and moved to reinforced areas. The fighters gathered their makeshift weapons, mostly mining tools modified with whatever technology they could spare. As the preparations continued, Keth thought about the bitter mathematics of their situation. They had started with nearly 12,000 exiles from 15 different species. Disease, accidents, crawler attacks, and simple starvation had reduced their number to around 8,000. Still too many to evacuate if rescue ever came, too few to properly defend their growing settlement. The communication station crackled again. Elder Keth, we have a problem. New contact on long-range sensors. It's not a crawler. Keth rushed to the station where Nerex was adjusting controls with 2 hands while reading displays with her other eyes. On the main screen, a blip moved through the asteroid field at the edge of the system. Ship configuration unknown, Nerex reported. It's small, maybe a survey vessel or scout ship. But here's the strange part, it's not running silent like Council ships do. It's broadcasting standard identification signals. Can you tell what species? The signal format is unusual. I've never seen anything like it. Other residents began gathering around the communication station. Word spread quickly through the shelter that something was happening. After 7 years of isolation, any change felt enormous. Are they headed for the planet? Asked Dr. Vogt, leaving his patient to join the crowd. Trajectory suggests a standard orbital approach, Nerex replied. They'll be here in 6 hours. 6 hours. Keth looked around at the faces surrounding him. Altarians, vegans, Andromedans, Centaurians, and 8 other species that had learned to work together because survival demanded it. They had built something here among the rocks and dust. Not comfortable, not safe, but undeniably real. Whatever ship was approaching would find them. The question was whether it brought another chance at life, or simply a different way to die. Outside, the wind continued its endless howling, carrying the scent of approaching storms and the distant sound of crawlers beginning to stir in their deep tunnels. Captain Juan checked his instruments for the third time in 10 minutes. The UES Sol drifted through the asteroid field like a careful hunter, sensors reaching out to map every rock and piece of space debris. This was supposed to be a routine survey mission: catalog the system, check for useful minerals, file a report, and move on to the next empty star system. But the readings didn't make sense. "Lieutenant Yuna, run that scan again," he said, leaning forward in his command chair. The bridge was small and efficient, designed for long-range exploration rather than combat. 5 crew members could handle everything the ship needed. Yuna's fingers danced across her control panel. Her dark hair fell across her face as she concentrated on the sensor display. "Sir, I'm definitely picking up organized electromagnetic signatures from the third planet. Power generation, communication signals, even what looks like industrial activity. But the charts show this system as uninhabited," said Navigator Junho from his station near the back of the bridge. "Empty for the last 50 years of surveys." Juan stood and walked to the main display screen. The third planet looked ugly from space, gray and brown with thick dust storms swirling across its surface. Not the kind of place anyone would choose to live. "Maybe someone is using it as a mining operation. Take us in for a closer look." As the Sol moved toward the planet, the readings became clearer and more confusing. Engineer Minho, monitoring the ship's systems from his station, called out updates every few minutes. "I'm seeing multiple power sources scattered across the northern continent," he reported. "Not big enough for major mining, but too organized for accidents." "Communication traffic is increasing," added Communications Officer Inho. "Multiple languages, some I don't recognize. Unknown languages." Captain Juan felt a chill run down his spine. In the 73 years since humans had joined galactic civilization, they had catalogued most of the common languages used in this sector of space. Lieutenant Yuna suddenly straightened in her chair. "Sir, I'm detecting life signs. Lots of them. At least 7 or 8,000 individuals scattered across several settlement sites." 8,000 people on a planet that's supposed to be empty? Juan shook his head. "Something's very wrong here. Take us into standard orbit and try to establish communication." The ship settled into a stable orbit above the largest concentration of life signs. Through the main viewer, they could see structures on the surface, not the clean lines of modern architecture, but improvised buildings that looked like they had been assembled from salvaged materials. "Incoming transmission," announced Inho. "Audio only, weak signal." "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a voice speaking accented but understandable standard galactic. The speaker sounded old, tired, and very surprised. "Unknown vessel, this is Elder Keth of the settlement. You should not be here. Council patrol ships monitor this system. They will destroy you if they find you observing us." Captain Juan exchanged glances with his crew. "Council ships? Monitoring an empty system? This is Captain Juan of the Earth vessel Sol. We're explorers, not Council forces. What kind of settlement are you running down there?" A long pause filled the bridge. When the voice returned, it carried a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Earth? You said Earth." "That's correct. We're conducting a survey of this system. Our charts show it as uninhabited." Another pause, then a bitter laugh. "Uninhabited. Yes, that's what they would want your charts to say. We are the cast aside, Captain. The unwanted. Our own people sent us here to die slowly rather than quickly." Lieutenant Yuna leaned toward her captain. "Sir, I'm picking up more details from the surface scans. Multiple species signatures, Altarian, Vegan, Centaurian, and several others. Mixed populations in each settlement." This was making less sense by the minute. Different alien species rarely lived together peacefully, especially not in exile conditions. "Elder Keth, how long have you been on this planet?" 7 years, Captain. We survive on salvage and stubbornness. But resources run low, and the native creatures grow bolder with each storm season." Engineer Minho looked up from his instruments. "Captain, I'm reading massive life forms moving underground. Some kind of burrowing predators, by the size of them." On the communication channel, Elder Ketha's voice continued. "You seem different from other space travelers we have encountered, Captain Juan. Most would have left by now, not wanting to risk Council displeasure by acknowledging our existence. Captain Juan made a decision that would change galactic history. Elder Keth, would you accept an offer to meet face to face? We could transport down to your location. You would set foot on a world of exiles? Risk contamination by our presence. Elder Keth, Juan said quietly, humans believe that every thinking being has worth, regardless of what mistakes they may have made or what their own people think of them. If you'll have us, we'd like to learn more about your situation. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. When Elder Ketha's voice returned, it shook with emotion. Captain, in 7 years, no one has offered to help the cast aside. No one has even acknowledged that we deserve to live. You would be welcome here. As the crew prepared for their trip to the surface, Lieutenant Yuna approached her captain. Sir, what if this really is some kind of council operation? What if we're walking into a trap? Captain Juan looked at the data streaming across their screens, thousands of beings barely surviving on a hostile world, forgotten by the galaxy that had created them. Then we'll face it together. But somehow, I don't think Elder Keth is lying. Engineer June wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched the massive atmospheric processor come online. The machine was twice the size of a transport ship, its silver surface gleaming in the alien sun. Around him, dozens of humans and aliens worked together to adjust settings and monitor the complex systems. 6 months had passed since Captain Juan's first contact with the outcasts. Now, Kepler 442c looked like a completely different world. Where desperate shelters had once stood, proper buildings rose from the transformed soil. Green plants grew in organized rows across valleys that had been nothing but dust and rock. Oxygen levels are up 12%, reported Dr. Kyung, checking her portable scanner. Beside her, a four-eyed Centaurian scientist named Vex made notes in his own language while nodding approval at the readings. The collaboration still amazed June. Back on Earth, xenobiologists studied alien species from a distance. Here, he worked side by side with beings whose biology he was still learning to understand. The 6-armed vegans could operate multiple control panels at once. The slug-like Andromedans could seal air leaks with their natural secretions. Even the children helped, their young minds quick to learn both human technology and alien techniques. The soil processors are ahead of schedule, called out Take, the project's chief engineer. He stood next to a converted mining drill that was injecting beneficial bacteria deep into the planet's surface. The Andromedan biochemical knowledge is incredible. They understand soil chemistry better than our best computers. Elder Keth approached the worksite, moving with the confident stride of someone who had found purpose after years of despair. His scarred face showed the permanent marks of malnutrition and hard living, but his eyes were bright with hope. Engineer June, he said in the much improved standard he had learned over the past months, I bring news from the Council of Elders. The Council of Elders was something new, a governing body made up of representatives from all 13 species in the colony. It had been Elder Ketha's idea, based on human democratic principles but adapted to account for different alien decision-making processes. What kind of news? June asked, though the serious expression on Ketha's face already suggested the answer. Our long-range sensors have detected ships gathering at the edge of the system. Council vessels from multiple worlds. They appear to be preparing for some kind of action. The work site gradually grew quiet as others overheard the conversation. This moment had been inevitable since the first human transport arrived with medical supplies and construction equipment. The Galactic Council had made it clear that they considered the exile program essential to maintaining social order. Dr. Kyung looked up from her scanner. How long do we have? 3 days, perhaps 4, Elder Keth replied. Enough time to evacuate the human personnel if Earth Command orders it. What about the colonists? Asked Vex, his 4 eyes showing concern. What happens to us? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Everyone knew the answer. The best case would be relocation to an even more remote world. The worst case didn't bear thinking about. That evening, the colony's main assembly hall filled with representatives from every species and settlement. The hall itself represented the collaboration that had made their success possible, human engineering providing the structure, vegan architecture creating the aesthetics, and Andromedan chemistry supplying the materials. Captain Juan stood before the mixed crowd. Behind him, holographic displays showed the approaching council fleet, 4 to 7 ships representing 8 different governments, all united in their determination to end what they called the Kepler experiment. The council has given us 72 hours to evacuate all human personnel, he announced. After that, they plan to relocate all colonists to separate facilities on different worlds. A chorus of sounds filled the hall, clicks, whistles, growls, and very human gasps of dismay. The past months had created bonds between species that had never existed before. Families had formed across genetic lines. Children played together regardless of how many limbs or eyes they had. "Captain," called out Dr. Vogt, the Andromedan healer, "what does Earth Command say about this ultimatum?" "Earth Command supports our mission," Juan replied carefully. "But they cannot order us to start a war with the entire Galactic Council." "Then the decision is ours to make," said a voice from the back of the hall. Colonel Deho, the leader of the human security forces, stood up. His uniform was dusty from helping with construction work, but his expression was determined. "I've been a soldier for 20 years. I've never fought for anything more important than this." One by one, other humans began standing. Engineer Take announced that the defensive systems were ready, orbital platforms disguised as communication satellites, but armed with the latest human military technology. Dr. Minho reported that the medical facilities could handle combat casualties. Even the civilian specialists volunteered for whatever roles they could fill. But it was the aliens who provided the biggest surprise. Elder Keth rose slowly, his weathered voice carrying clearly through the hall. "For 7 years, we prepared to die forgotten and alone. These humans gave us something we had never expected, a chance to live with dignity. If they will stand with us, we will stand with them." Zara, the six-armed vegan teacher, stood next. "My people exiled me for being different. Here, my differences make me valuable. This is worth fighting for." Dr. Vogt raised one of his slug-like appendages. "The Andromedans have biochemical weapons that the Council has never encountered. We offer them freely." As the meeting continued late into the night, plans took shape. The humans had superior technology and tactics, but limited numbers. The aliens had detailed knowledge of Council military procedures and unique capabilities that had never been used in warfare. Most importantly, they had something the Council forces would not expect: absolute unity of purpose born from shared struggle and mutual respect. Admiral Bora stood on the bridge of the UES Busan and watched 4 to 7 enemy ships drop out of hyperspace like angry metal birds. Her tactical display showed the impossible odds. The Earth fleet had only 12 ships against nearly 4 times that number. "Council vessels are taking attack positions," reported Lieutenant Hajin from his weapons station. The young officer's voice stayed steady, but his hands moved quickly over his controls as he prepared the ship's defensive systems. "Signal from the Council flagship," announced Communications Officer Inho. "They want to speak with you directly, Admiral." "Put them through." The main screen flickered, showing the bridge of an Altarian heavy cruiser. Admiral Zexhai stood in the center, his blue-scaled face twisted with anger. Behind him, officers from multiple species worked at stations designed for different body types. "Admiral Bora," Zexhai said in perfect standard, "this is your final warning. Remove all human personnel from Kepler 442c immediately. The aberrants will be relocated to proper containment facilities." Bora kept her expression calm. "Admiral Zexhai, the beings on that planet are under Earth's protection. Any attempt to remove them against their will is an act of war." "War?" Zexhai laughed, a harsh sound that made several bridge officers wince. "You have 12 ships. We have 47. Your defiance ends here." The transmission cut off, leaving the human bridge in tense silence. Through the main viewer, they could see the Council ships moving into battle formation, a classic encirclement pattern designed to overwhelm the smaller Earth fleet. On the planet's surface, Colonel Deho watched the sky through the reinforced windows of the command center. Next to him, Elder Keth held a communication device that connected to settlements across the continent. "All civilians are in the shelters," Keth reported. "Our fighters are ready." "Good," Deho replied, checking his sidearm automatically. "Remember, if any Council troops make it to the surface, we don't fight to win. We fight to survive until the fleet can help us." "Colonel," said a voice behind them. They turned to see Zara, the six-armed vegan teacher, leading a group of mixed-species volunteers. Each carried improvised weapons or equipment. The children wanted to help with the defense preparations. Deho looked at the group: young humans, Altarians, Centaurians, and others, all born or raised in the colony. They knew no other home than this transformed world. "Set up the emergency communication networks," he told them. "If the orbital battle goes badly, we'll need to coordinate resistance efforts." In space, the first shots had already been fired. Captain Sook's destroyer Incheon used its advanced stealth systems to approach a Council battleship from behind. The larger ship's sensors couldn't track the smaller vessel until it was too late. Incheon's particle beams struck the battleship's engine section, causing massive explosions. Before the enemy could respond, the destroyer vanished back into the asteroid field like a ghost. Target damaged and falling behind the main formation, reported Hajin. Captain Suk reports minimal damage to his ship. Admiral Bora nodded approvingly. Human ships were smaller and less heavily armed than Council vessels, but they were faster and used technology the enemy had never encountered. Earth's military doctrine emphasized speed and surprise over raw firepower. Signal Commander Yun, she ordered. Begin electronic warfare operations. The corvette Jeju activated its sophisticated jamming systems, broadcasting false signals across multiple frequencies. On 2 Council ships, targeting computers suddenly showed friendly vessels as enemies. The resulting confusion caused them to fire on each other before their crews could correct the mistake. But the Council forces adapted quickly. Admiral Zexai's voice cut through the battle communications. All ships, ignore electronic signatures. Target only by visual confirmation. Concentrate fire on the human flagship. 20 ships turned their weapons toward the Busan. Admiral Bora felt the deck vibrate under her feet as energy beams struck the ship's shields. Shield strength down to 60%, reported Engineer Minho from the damage control station. We can't take much more of this concentrated fire. All ships, execute dispersal pattern Delta, Bora commanded. The Earth fleet scattered in different directions, forcing the Council forces to split their attention. The battle became a deadly game of cat and mouse among the asteroids. Human ships used their superior maneuverability to strike quickly and retreat before the enemy could respond effectively. But there were too many Council vessels to avoid forever. Captain Jinwoo's cruiser Seoul took heavy damage when 3 enemy ships cornered it near a large asteroid. Emergency systems kept the ship operational, but barely. Sir, called his tactical officer, we've lost primary weapons and our jump drive is offline. Before Jinwoo could respond, unexpected help arrived. The asteroid itself seemed to come alive, launching crude but effective missiles at the Council ships. The attacks came from mining equipment that the colonists had secretly converted into weapons. This is Elder Keth, came a voice over the communication system. The colonies may be on the surface, but we control the asteroid mining stations. We will not let our protectors fight alone. The tide of battle began to turn. Council ships found themselves caught between the mobile human fleet and the fixed defenses that the aliens had secretly prepared. More importantly, the alien resistance proved that this was not just a human operation, but a genuine alliance. After 6 hours of fighting, Admiral Zexai's fleet began to retreat. 23 Council ships limped away from the system, while the rest had been destroyed or disabled. Admiral Bora opened a system-wide channel. This is Admiral Bora to all vessels and ground stations. We've won this battle, but the war is just beginning. On the planet below, the colonists emerged from their shelters to see the debris of enemy ships falling like metal rain through the atmosphere. President Hyun stepped onto the platform in New Haven's Great Assembly Hall and looked out at the most unusual gathering in galactic history. Representatives from 37 different worlds filled the massive space, their varied forms creating a living rainbow of diversity. Some sat in chairs, others perched on raised platforms, and a few floated in specialized tanks filled with their home atmospheres. 2 years had passed since the Battle of Kepler 442c, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The small colony of outcasts had become the center of something much larger, a new alliance built on the radical idea that every thinking being had value. Today we sign the Kepler Accords, President Hyun announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall through translation systems that converted her words into dozens of languages. These documents establish a simple truth, that dignity and opportunity belong to every sapient being, regardless of their differences. In the front row, Governor Keth sat beside Admiral Bora, both wearing formal clothes that couldn't quite hide the scars of their shared struggle. The Altarian's weathered face showed pride as he watched beings from across the galaxy prepare to commit to principles that had once seemed impossible. The changes had started slowly. After news of the battle spread, individual beings from Council worlds began arriving at New Haven in small ships, requesting asylum. Political dissidents, genetic variants, religious minorities, all the people their societies had labeled as problems. But then something unexpected happened. The outcasts proved to be extraordinarily valuable. Dr. Kyung, now Director of Colonial Sciences, had documented the transformation in her reports to Earth. When you take people that every other society has rejected and give them purpose, they work harder than anyone else. They have something to prove. The 6 armed vegans revolutionized manufacturing with their ability to handle complex assembly processes. The slug-like Andromedans developed atmospheric processing techniques that could terraform hostile worlds in half the usual time. The politically exiled Centaurian scientists made breakthrough discoveries in faster-than-light communication. Most remarkably, they did it all while working together. Species that had been enemies for centuries found common ground in their shared experience of rejection. The representatives of the Kepler Alliance will now sign the founding charter, announced Elder Keth, who had learned to use human-style ceremonies mixed with traditions from a dozen alien cultures. One by one, delegates approached the signing table. Admiral Zexhai, the former council commander who had led the attack on New Haven, signed with hands that shook slightly. His nephew had been among the Altarian exiles, and the reunion had changed both their lives. I spent 40 years believing that some beings were worth more than others, he had told President Hyun the day before. It took a human to show me how wrong I was. The vegan delegate signed using 3 arms simultaneously, each holding a different ceremonial pen. The Andromedan representative left a biochemical signature that glowed briefly on the special paper. Even species that had no hands found ways to make their mark on the historic document. Captain Jinwoo, now promoted to Admiral and Commander of the Alliance Defense Force, watched from the balcony with Commander Sora. Below them, the ceremony represented everything they had fought to protect. Do you think it will last? Sora asked quietly. This alliance we've built. Jinwoo looked down at the crowded hall. Human children played with young aliens in the designated family areas. Former outcasts wore the uniforms of Alliance officials. In the press section, journalists from dozens of worlds documented history being made. The old galactic order was built on fear, he replied. Fear of differences, fear of change, fear of people who think differently. This one is built on hope. The signing ceremony concluded with a moment that would be remembered for generations. As the last delegate finished signing, the hall's great windows opened to reveal the city of New Haven spreading out beyond. What had once been desperate shelters built from scraps was now a thriving metropolis where beings from across the galaxy lived and worked together. In the harbor, ships from Alliance worlds loaded cargo that would carry New Haven's innovations to every corner of known space. The atmospheric processes developed by Andromedan human teams. The manufacturing techniques perfected by vegan engineers. The medical advances created by Dr. Minho's interspecies research teams. But perhaps most importantly, they carried the proof that outcasts could become leaders, that the unwanted could become essential, and that cooperation was stronger than conquest. As the celebration moved to the plaza outside, President Hyun found herself approached by a young human reporter. Madam President, the reporter asked, what do you say to critics who claim this alliance is just Earth trying to build its own empire? Hyun smiled as she watched the mixed crowds in the plaza. Humans danced alongside 6-armed vegans to music that blended Earth jazz with Andromedan harmonics. Children from a dozen species played games that required 4 eyes, 6 arms, or the ability to change color. Look around, she said simply. Does this look like an empire to you? We didn't conquer anyone. We just refused to let anyone be thrown away. That night, as the celebration continued under alien stars, the sounds of joy echoed across New Haven. In homes throughout the city, families that spanned multiple species shared meals and stories. In the schools, human teachers worked with alien educators to prepare the next generation for a galaxy where differences were celebrated rather than feared. The Kepler Accords were more than just a treaty. They were a promise that no thinking being would ever again be labeled worthless and forgotten. The cast aside had found their voice, and the galaxy would never be the same.